Hello everyone, you're watching our Indie Spotlight for April 2018. If you're new here, I'm Sarks. Welcome to the channel. This month, it looks like Celeste won the Twitter poll by just a scrape. Wow, would you look at those numbers? By golly, those are what? 25, 54 total? Those are some big ones. Since it was so gosh darn definitive, I guess I'm backed into a corner here. Let's talk Celeste. Here we have a neat little game by the dev team Matt Makes Games, which, unsurprisingly, is led by Matt Thorson, as well as Noel Barry, the two gents behind the game, Towerfall Ascension. Calling Celeste neat and little doesn't really give it proper justice though, as I'll explain in just a bit. But for not being a big budget heavy hitter, it still made a splash in the indie scene and garnered much larger recognition post-release from other gaming groups like the speedrunning community and the speculative community for its gameplay and themes respectively. Like all lovely indie games, Celeste has a pretty interesting background. The game was originally planned to be a simple little experience with the base idea of climbing a mountain being at the heart of their direction. Matt and Noel started by constructing a prototype, which, if you've played Celeste, you would have noticed is actually featured in the game. Labeled Pico 8, this prototype is a tinier, more bare-bones version of Celeste that can be beaten relatively quickly in comparison to the main game. The name Pico 8 actually comes from the online fantasy console developing tool Pico 8, which allows users to construct tiny games that could serve as prototypes or could be individual experiences. Browsing the website's top cartridges, one could find Celeste at the top, of course, followed by a slew of fantastic little projects from all sorts of creators. One that particularly impressed me was this Star Fox remake. Neat. After the idea for Celeste was constructed in this program, the dev team began their work on the game proper, constructing levels in their own custom design tool, bringing Lena Raine in for the soundtrack, and Amora Bettany for the artwork. As development went on, their previously simple idea began to complexify, and the idea of climbing a mountain began to be explored even more thoroughly. What could climbing a mountain mean for someone? How could it affect their life? Why would someone be led to take on that kind of challenge? In an interview with Nintendo Power, I can't believe I'm saying that, in 2018, what a time to be alive, Thorson and Barry used the mountain Everest as their main example of the ultimate real-world feat to be accomplished, and this was something they thought about when making Celeste. At its core, Celeste is a platformer where your movement options are relatively simplistic. You run, jump, dash, and climb in order to surmount various kinds of challenges. You play as a girl named Madeline who has taken it upon herself to climb Celeste Mountain, an infamous mountain in Canada that is known for its unfathomable difficulty. Simple enough idea, of course, as this sets the basis for your gameplay. Throughout every chapter, you climb upwards to ascend the mountain in hopes you will eventually reach the top. This idea is made more complex as you progress through the game and you learn more about Madeline. Interestingly, just as Madeline's story starts off relatively simple and grows thoroughly more complex, the gameplay does the same, starting the player off with challenges that have more or less straightforward mechanics. Now, I won't spoil any of these complexities because they're just that good, but if you were compelled to put the game down because of these simplicities, I highly encourage you to pick it back up and dive into it for another few hours. I've replayed the game twice over now, and I've noticed that even the beginning sequences are integral to the larger story, so don't think you can ignore that first impression either. Story-wise, the game is absolutely phenomenal. I had several moments where once I had beaten a chapter, I had to put down my control to sob for a second before continuing. It really punches the gut sometimes. That's not to say there aren't moments of pure bliss, and I think there turns out to be way more of those than not as you keep going. But it is these low moments that Madeline has that will really grip you and have you concerned and perhaps sometimes feeling a sense that you've been where she is before. There are some deep themes tackled in the game, and as I said, I won't spoil them, but it is worth mentioning that if you think the game is too hard, keep pressing on. The mountain climb analogy could not fit better into the larger narrative for this exact reason. And that's what makes the gameplay so great. I've never felt once that Celeste threw me a challenge I couldn't overcome somehow. It was, at worst, very challenging. Challenging to the point where it tested my limits. But then, Celeste showed me that my limits are much further than I thought they were. kind of an interesting idea. The gameplay balance is such that the player learns more about themselves and their own difficulty threshold as they go further. Towards the middle of the game, I couldn't even think about reaching the top of the entire mountain, let alone beating one chapter, because the difficulty tested me that much sometimes. But lo and behold, before I knew it, I found myself looking at the results screen and then later replaying the game over a second time. And while I'm on the topic of replayability, let me just gush about this aspect of the game. The game is structured so that getting through the levels is in themselves a difficult enough challenge to keep you busy. Though most people will probably not do that because Celeste immediately introduces you to its main collectible, the strawberries. Now these are completely optional. They don't really provide you with any bonuses or anything, but they are crazy fun to collect. Every level has a certain amount of them, and on my first run through the game, there wasn't a single level that I successfully collected them all in. Beyond the strawberries, there are hidden collectibles that add some hefty challenge to the game. First off are the crystal hearts. These are particularly enigmatic collectibles that can only be collected if you're a stinking genius and fantastic at exploration. Seriously, some of these are straight up obscure, but it really ups the coolness factor surrounding them when you can only figure out how to obtain them through word of mouth or some extended tutorials online. Reminds me of playground myths about Mario 3, or the YouTube tutorials on how to collect all the stars in Braid. Speaking of Mario 3 though, one of my favorite crystal hearts involves using your knowledge of Mario 3's secrets in order to complete the puzzle. I wonder what that white cube is for. Next is the cassette tapes. These things give you what are called the B-side chapters, incredibly grueling challenges that take some real grit and determination. These award red hearts, which are necessary towards unlocking a secret ultimate challenge at the end of the game. Upon completing these, there are some additional challenges that are even more difficult. Golden strawberries appear, which basically make you go through every chapter without dying at all in order to get them. And frickin' seasides. You know, I only figured out there were seasides like a couple days ago, and I was a little astonished. These are even harder challenges than the B-sides, and they award you with golden hearts. Did I mention that for the ultimate challenge you unlock at the end of the game, there are B-side and C-side variants for that too? Yeah, it's pretty insane. There's just so much to unlock and additional challenges to explore that this game will have you playing it far beyond your first run-through. There are little details I could get into about the different characters you'll meet along the way, and the sorts of crazy mechanics you'll have to use to beat levels, and the amazing last chapter of the game, but seriously, I can't stress enough how you have to just play it for yourself. I went into this game only having watched one review for it, and that was really a couple months before I actually played it, and I forgot everything in that review by that time. Going into it blind is pretty awesome, so if you can, that's how I'd recommend you play it. If you've seen too much or heard too much of it by this point, then it's still a fantastic game besides that. As I mentioned earlier, it's got loads of community support, namely from the speedrunning folks. They just devoured Celeste. And they still are. Dudes from that community are still creating new ways to run through the game in the most optimal way possible. And man, they've got it down to a science. As of this video, the world record for the game is only 6 minutes under the fastest task time, which is insane. We're approaching machine-level skill with this community. Honestly, if you guys have never seen a Celeste speedrun, do yourself a favor, beat the game, and then watch a video of the current world record. Don't just take that from me either. Try Hungrybox, the top Smash Bros. Melee player in the world. The dude said he thought he was good at video games until he watched a Celeste speedrun. It's a testament to Celeste's near-perfect platforming controls, movement code, and tight physics, which, by the way, the movement code is so godlike, other developers are outsourcing it for their own games. If all that doesn't convince you, not sure what will, but get this game. You won't regret it, you'll have tons of fun, and if you're afraid of the difficulty, don't be. The devs took pains to balance the heck out of this game, so most people will be fine, I think, with what they've done here. And if that's still too much, they've developed, last minute by the way, one of the most inclusive assist modes out there. It allows you to scale the difficulty to your preference, literally hand tailor it to suit your personal skill threshold. If you think the pace of it all is just too darn fast, you can scale it down to 90% and make it a bit easier to digest. It's got a few neat options that make it feel like a learning tool rather than an easier way to play. Just the way I think all assists modes should be. Instead of coddling and giving you the impervious fly forever suit, looking at you 3D world, why not let the player use a tool that they can not only play the game with, but actually learn how to get better with? Well, anyway guys, I really hope you give this one a chance. It really, really deserves it. As usual, please take a look at the games up on the screen and tell us in the comments or on Twitter if you'd like to see any of those for next month's Spotlight. Or, if you've got a better indie suggestion, tell us that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. That's not to say there aren't moments of pure bliss, and I think they turn out to be way... Oh. That's not to say there are moments of... Why am I such a failure? That's not to say there aren't moments of pure bliss, and... That was terrible inflection. That's not to say there aren't moments of pure bliss, and I think there What? Oh, there turns out. Okay. All right. One more time. That's not to say there aren't moments of pure bliss, and I think there turns out to be way more of those than not as you keep... Ah! Okay. One more time.